Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Reframe series. And today we have a very special guest with us. So we have Vandana Kumar, who is a publishing executive with a 35-year track record in the industry. As a new immigrant, she co founded India Currents magazine in 1987 and published an award winning print magazine from April 1987 to December 2017. India Currents went fully digital and is today, and has the largest following amongst Indians in the United States. Vandana has won awards for overall excellence at the Greater Bay Area Journalism Awards, hosted by the San Francisco Press Club over the past several years. Vandana has won the Asian American Hero Award from the County of Santa Clara and the Leadership in Business Award from the California Legislative Assembly. In 2020, Vandana was nominated as the American Leadership Fellow, Class 39. Um, and Vandana cares deeply about social justice and serves in the Friends of PACT Advisory Board. She is the President Emeritus Board of Directors of Narika, an organization that serves women facing domestic violence. And she's just amazing and such an inspiring individual. I'm so excited that we get to interview her today. And I wanted to start us off with the question of what was the moment that inspired you to begin India Currents as a new immigrant?
Hey, Arpita. Warm hello to all your listeners and viewers. Thank you for having me on your show. And thanks for that very generous introduction. Um, I've been here for a long time, as is evident. And it's hard to think of, you know, a moment where, this whole idea crystallized because you have to go back to 1987. And for a lot of people now who were not even born then, you know, it's hard to imagine that moment. You see, because the internet was not invented, and so, for a lot of people, that's the only world they know. This was a different moment, and as a new immigrant in California, we did not find ourselves, we could not find ourselves reflected in the media, you know? So I was an avid newspaper reader. I would always be reading the newspaper because that's how we got the news when I was in India. And I was looking, and I would think that surely there are other people like me. Surely there are others that are, doing things around here that would be worthy of some mention. But we were completely invisible in the media. And in some ways, that gave the impetus for providing a space where we could all celebrate, because we did know that there were lots of other people like us. And I say us because, my partner in the business was my brother in law, Arvind Kumar, who came up with the idea. And he said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a place where we could all always, it would be like a festival of sorts. Every month you come together. And it's also important to remember that this was not born out of a business idea. It was a labor of love. It was a place that we sought belonging. And that's the reason why the magazine started, a place to create a community. And also, to remember that all immigrants, it doesn't matter where in the world they come from, we are seeking. Now, again, you have to put yourself back
Yeah.
in that moment in time. And it's hard to, for somebody who may not have been there, how do you imagine a world in which communication was not instantaneous? And the fact that even when the fax came around, I forget when that was like, oh, huge. You can send something here and it can get to another part of the world so quickly. So the internet was a whole, like a game changer. But all immigrants, no matter where they come from, they are looking for a way to belong. And we are seeking the familiar in an
Mm.
unfamiliar land. Like, I used to do this, I used to eat this. How can I do that here? How can I do that in Fremont, in San Jose, Santa Clara? How do I do that? I want to eat
Yeah.
jhalmuri. How do I make that? And uh, India Currents actually became the platform that people started sharing that kind of stuff. And you could make jhalmuri by mixing Rice Krispies and planter peanuts and the oil that what we would get in those days. How do you go about making that? And it's kind of a weird thing for anyone who's not South Asian to even hear that, because, like, why on earth would you mix these items? But we are seeking to create a jhalmuri that we perhaps ate growing
Yeah.
up in India.
Yes, this idea of finding the familiar or building the familiar in a new place. Um, I I would love to know. I mean, it definitely. I can imagine there must have been so many challenges in trying to get something like this off the ground. What yeah, what kind of challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them? Uh, how did you build this to what it is now?
Well, uh, I'm going to go back to the fact
Yeah.
that this was a labor of love, and when it's a labor of love, then uh, no challenges are unsurmountable. And so, but, seriously, the fact is, the challenge of resources is, and has been, continues to be, like, an issue for
Yeah.
all, media companies, and in various degrees, obviously. But for us, that was the biggest thing. So we didn't have an issue with creating content, because some of it we had our own ideas. And also, actually, that brings me to a very interesting point, because we didn't have resources, right? So we thought, why don't we ask our
Mm.
readers to write? And today there is a term for it: crowdsourcing. But we were crowdsourcing before really there
Yeah.
was even a term for it. And but it was a necessity, like, because you don't have money, how do you do it? Yes, you can edit, you can do some layout. And this is, like, I'm going to take you so way back, you have no idea that this is how things got done. But, you know we'd print it off on our laptops. you know we had these big light tables, and the press would give us these big boards divided into quadrants. And you they said, okay, page 2 and page 68 and page 72, and but this is the order in which you need to paste the pages on this. And so we'd put it on a light table. You peer on it, looking at it, because it has to be aligned correctly, and so that the pages, they don't look weird. In today's world, it all seems so strange and so bizarre that you'd have to do all of this by hand. But we'd do that. We'd get the pictures, take it to a linotronic printer, get the pictures printed, then come and wax the printers and wax the images, and roll them onto the board. And then we would create these big sheets and take them to the printer, who would then go on with the next step. So when we moved from that place to actually doing desktop printing, meaning, hey, we created everything, we aligned everything on our computers, because the programs allowed us to do all of that, and no peering on a light table. That was revolutionary. It's like, whoa, we don't have to do that. And now, And then today, anyone can publish at any moment by the push of a button, right? And images, and no, you don't need time lag in order to get those images processed and then waxed and put on and put on. So um, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of changes in this industry, and it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. Those were some of the big changes. Resources, clearly. Interesting thing for us though was, perhaps it was that moment in time where, um, it people were
Mm,
hungry to connect. You see, we perhaps because
yeah.
provided that platform. And when we celebrated our 25th anniversary, the consul general had come, to celebrate with us, and then he said that if an event isn't listed in India Currents, is it really happening?
Yeah.
So we and he also said that you helped build a community, and I think that just felt so heartfelt to me, and I felt like we had done something that was unique. And to say that, and I do believe what he said, that I think we played a big role in building a community, because we were all disparate. You see, people were all over, and there was no way in, or no one place that we could connect. There wasn't one community center, there wasn't one place that we would all go to. And there were few things that were happening. There was, classical arts happening someplace, music someplace, classical dance happening someplace, and people would go depending on their areas of interest, but there wasn't a place where we were all congregating. And then very soon India Currents became that place where people were all congregating. They were sharing ideas. People were, all kinds of things that was happening in the community started getting listed in our magazine. That's why I say that, coming together, what does that actually mean? It means that people from who were doing anything at all were, making sure they got a presence, they got visibility into this. And I actually had a very fun job at that time. I wasn't the publisher or anything. I was, the calendar editor, and my job was, building a database of, um, people that were organizing events. And so there wasn't a database. I couldn't Google anything. So how do I find these people? It's like anywhere I go, if I go to a grocery store, if I go to a library, and I'd see a flyer about such and such event happening, such a place. So it's busy scribble that down, and take that person's name and number, and then go and create it. We had an Excel spreadsheet where we would, actually, it was Lotus 123. I'm really dating myself, but before we moved on to Excel. Um, that we started creating, like building a database. There wasn't a database of any kind that was accessible to us. And Arpita, you and I have spoken about the fact that how little of this data is available about the Indian
Yeah.
community in America. And this was way back then.
I'm so fascinated to hear you say this because, as someone who works with data for a living, just hearing you talking about building databases and using systems like Lotus 123, I'm like, now I want to go and like actually look up what that system was like and how you even used it, because it's, yeah, you were really a pioneer when you were starting this. Um, and and especially I think, it's also fascinating knowing that the population, the South Asian population, has expanded so much over the last like decades in the United States. Since 1965, when a lot of these rules were created that allowed more South Asians into the country, and this has kind of been part of that building of community. Um, I I'm so interested to know, how were you able to connect and build that community when there were like cell phones weren't a thing, and you had to kind of directly communicate with people, as and especially as someone who is of like younger group that mainly communicates over text or over social media platforms. It's really like crazy to think about this time.
So there was obviously no social media, there was no cell phone, there was no text. So, um, but also remember, it was that time where I didn't know that those things could happen. So what we had was telephones, and I wasn't afraid of actually picking. I was also very young at that point, you know. So when you're young and naive, um, you don't really fear things, you know. And uh, I was telling you about building this database, creating a list. So I would just keep calling people every month, whoever they were. It's like I saw whether it was like a, Tamil Association or a Federation of Indian Associations or even a Bihar Association. I would just keep calling those people every month. And my spiel was, "Hi, this is Vandana from India Currents. I'm just calling to check. Do you have any events coming up?" Now, remember, in those days, there were very few events that used to happen. So most of the time, I would hear is like, "No, we are not. We do only one event a year." So, so then I just make a note like, "Oh, they said they do only one event a year, and they do it in October. So maybe in September timeframe, I'll just call them and." They'll have a better idea because in January, if I'm calling them, they have no idea, like what they're going to do. So I built some intelligence into the system, but it happened by hands on work. It happened by making these phone friends that I made over this period of time because I became a familiar voice, you see. Even though we hadn't met, like for many years, I've continued to work without even meeting any of these people. But I was a voice they recognized because I was consistent. I would just keep calling. And when they eventually do events or they knew about events, then you know what happens?
Mm,
You build a relationship, and then they're happy to share with you. It's like, "Hey, Vandana, we are actually going to be doing something in the next 2 months, but did you know that there's going to be a holy event that's happening there?" I know, I did not know. So now my phone friend, has told me about something else. And I said, "Oh, how can I find out some information about that?" He's like, "Oh, you should call Mr. So and so, or you should call, Sunita ji, or you should call, you know, giving me a reference." And that's why I call them my phone friends because that's how they became. And in a way, this whole idea of building a community, now that I'm looking back, I think this was
mm,
woven in our DNA. We just didn't know it. We didn't have the right words to articulate what we were actually doing and the value that we ended up providing to the community at large. And today we have terminology for a lot of these things that we didn't have, but we
yeah.
were doing that anyways.
I I would love to know, in line with that, how did you think about the finances for something like this? Um, I think even thinking about starting something like a media organization, and I know like it's constantly, um, it's a constant challenge in trying to get people to pay for information. So when you started off, creating, did was it easy to get buy-in for people to subscribe to a magazine like this? And were there initial hurdles you had to face, and even you had to use a printing press sort of system? Yeah.
Um, So the biggest cost, today, first of all, is labor. You have to pay people, but for us, it was a labor of love. We were not getting paid. We were three of us, Arvind, Ashok, and myself, and we were responsible for coming up with the content. And the first issue, one of them actually printed off at their work, uh, because
Yeah.
they had daytime jobs. This was the labor of love, as I said. So Arvind actually printed it at his work. And then all of us, we went and distributed in places, because that was who am I going to pay to go distribute magazines. We printed 5,000 copies, and just going and dropping it off at a few places that we know, again comes back to the idea of data and databases. There wasn't a database to say here are all the Indian stores, or that. It's like whatever we knew, whatever we could come up with, you create a list, you create that, you start building that database. And we truly built a database. There really was nothing that we could just take and use. It's whatever we came across, whatever we found,
Yeah.
we would keep adding, and just went and distributed it. Now the interesting thing was, um, because we hadn't thought about the ROI and what it was. So really, what had we spent?
Mm.
Our time. We hadn't even printed at our own expense. So the first issue. And then what happened is, we had put our number in the first issue. I still have a
Oh, wow.
magazine. I still have the first issue. Um,
Yeah.
I should send you a picture of that. um, we had put a number, not really knowing what's going to happen if people call that number, you know. Uh, but we started getting calls from the very first issue. It's like businesses call. There was a real estate agent that called, or there's a dance teacher that called, or there was a lawyer that called. It's like, this is interesting. Can I put my ad on that? And that's why I thought, we arrived at that moment in time where people
Mm.
were hungry to connect, and there was no way to connect. And then we became the platform. We never tried to sell. We were never successful in selling a subscription. We tried, but uh, the bulk of the immigrants at that point were first generation immigrants, and first generation immigrants are often concerned about every dollar they spend. Is it? So we decided it was more important for to get our magazine read, and perhaps advertising would be the revenue model. And we were incredibly successful at that, Arpita. We were really successful because we provided that, for small businesses, small desi businesses, an opportunity to reach a direct audience, a targeted audience, whether they were teaching Bharatanatyam dance or Carnatic music or Hindustani music, or there was a grocery store that was selling atta, chawal, dal, or there was an Indian restaurant that was making or serving dosas, or had a lunch special, or all you can eat buffet thali, or things like that. They were able to advertise with us and reach the very audience they want to reach. They didn't have to dilute their dollars, like, oh, let me place in the Mercury News because it's very expensive. We were very reasonable. We were very, it was very reasonable for businesses to spend that on advertising because they got an
Yeah.
immediate response. And that became our model, and that also was an industry model, the media industry model, like supported by ad
Yeah.
revenue. That revenue allowed us to print, mail, and distribute. At our peak, we were doing 30,000 magazines every month. 12,000 of those magazines were mailed directly to people in their homes. The rest was by free distribution at grocery stores and restaurants. Over time, we continued to build that database. Remember the one that started in Lotus 123, and then Arvind actually created built a database. I don't even know in what form, but we did that. And then eventually moved on to um, more other platforms that help track. things like subscriptions and advertising, and it was not something that we had to create ourselves, but that had other functionalities built in and that we could
Yeah,
use.
it's I'm just it feels so crazy to hear you talk about this because I remember going into an Indian grocery store when I was younger and picking up a copy of India Currents, and it was the first time I
I love hearing that. I love hearing that, from a lot of young people who say that, oh, I saw India Currents was always on my parents' coffee table, it was always there. And, but to know that it was a part of your life in some way, that it came into your homes in some way. And over the years, so many, thousands and thousands of people um, picked up the magazine, read the magazine, contacted us. And I just felt I was in that privileged place of being a witness to what was happening in this community that we serve, that, yeah, my partners, Arvind left in 1997, and Ashok left maybe 2004, I want to say, or maybe five. And there was that moment for me to think like, oh my God, can I really do
yeah,
this on my own? Can I really do this, or should I do this? Because I was, it was comfortable to have
yeah.
someone to lean on, you know, like even if I'm not there, then somebody else can, take over. But over time, I realized like we had built a good organization, and I can go away and things will still happen. So
I,
that's a good place to be
yeah.
at.
So I think this actually is a good spot to lead us to the next question, which is, um, are there, and especially I would love your perspective as a woman sharing this as well. Um, are there are there any lessons that you want to share with us from your experience that might help young entrepreneurs like myself, and others who want to create something, and um, because I think it's so inspiring to hear you speak in that you have both built a community and you've also been an experiencer of the benefits of that community. And I think a lot of South Asians that I know, do feel kind of disconnected from that community. In some ways, we are very connected, but in some ways, we are very disconnected. So I'd love your perspective on any lessons or recommendations you would have for those who do want to build.
I'm uh, I don't want to belabor the point about labor of love, but I think no matter what you decide to do, whatever business you decide, it's really important for you to understand what's the driving force. What's the driving force behind that? Because it's going to help you define a mission, you know? And for us, it was loneliness. We wanted to connect with others because we knew that they were out there. But how do
Mm,
you find them? And um, eh, eh, and then to and our content has evolved over the years, because to be a true reflection of a community magazine, you also have to reflect the community, right? And a community has changed along the years. So you're asking about valuable lessons for this. Well, I want to go back to that. It's like you have to understand what is your driving force. What do you hope to accomplish? Because are you trying to do like an e-commerce based business? And I'm strictly talking about the media, digital media space right now, because you have to have a business model, right? And because the media landscape has changed, the advertising model is not going to work. So what are the model? How are you hoping to
mm,
sustain this? And what is the value you're hoping to deliver? Why should somebody, come to you? And in some ways, it feels jaded to say this, but I have to say, business plans don't work in this business. It's really passion
Mm,
that does. And I would say that if you're looking to start something, you find like minded people, people who value the mission you're hoping to deliver on. Immerse yourself, invest in yourself, learn what it is that you are trying to do and create. And above all, be kind to yourself because you need time. And when you're young, that's the one currency that people seem to be very impatient about: time. Because it takes time to build a community, it takes time to build value for what you are creating. And it took us time too. And in a ways, we are reinventing ourselves right now. The same things that we did back then are not really relevant to people right now. But the bottom line remains, you have to think about how things are going to get sustained, and what are you
mm,
hoping to accomplish, because that
yeah.
keeps you grounded.
Um, I Yeah, I think those are all really valuable questions, especially in this age of new forms of media as well. I think like there are a lot of challenges within the media industry right now, where you have like like the New York Times and the LA Times. They're all struggling with how do we actually fund our newspapers or providing and get people to pay for information, which seems so readily available in so many other sources. Um, so it seems like it really requires a lot of passion and deep desire to really connect with people in a very specific way in order to get something off the ground. Is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, I definitely I can feel that. I wonder now, and even as I was hearing you talk about this kind of needing to constantly reinvent yourself, even as an organization that has been well established, um, how do you've built out this team to manage the work, and how have these challenges for you changed over this time, and how has this reinvention process taken place even within your own organization?
So the first reinvention was actually about content, you know, where you're talking about what are the kinds of stories that you're doing. And, in the beginning, our early years was heavily focused on the
Mm,
heritage arts of India. I actually learned a lot about that after I left India, after
yeah.
I arrived here in this country. And I realized what a rich heritage we have, and how ignorant I was. And so it's very humbling. And then there are these amazing stalwarts that we have seen in our communities who have been leading to educate a new generation of Indian Americans, South Asians, and about this rich heritage that we have. And today, so many, it's much more than Bollywood gets all the the flash and the bang and flash, but um, you'll find the classically trained dancers or musicians, they are able to accomplish phenomenal phenomenally in their spaces, in whatever else that they may choose to do. So, for us it was content. Then also, because the community was evolving, where you find that now a large number of people came on the H1 visas that happened around the year 2000, bringing a lot of people and a different kind of Indian Americans, simply because before that people came here as students. So essentially, poor,
Yeah.
you know. But now people were coming
Mm.
with jobs, with a paycheck, and they
Mm.
came with their families because families got H4 visas and they came with that. And they were coming with the idea
Mm.
that they could spend, and it gave rise to a whole mini industry of women that would create, chapatis at home or make namkeen and nashta and that kind of stuff that they would be selling at the grocery stores, or the rise of the all you can eat or the lunch thalis that we saw proliferate, absolutely proliferate the valley. And people would have a big lunch or all you can eat, and maybe not eat at dinner time, like it would be filling enough, or just have milk and cereal later on. Like, we'd hear all of these kinds of stories. There was also, the fact that I'm a woman, and there was a lot of things that I noticed were happening that were touching my life too. Just like the H1 and the H4, my brother came here on an H1, my sister came here on an H1. So then I find that H4 spouses have no rights. They
Sorry,
have
one
no,
second.
you need to, yeah,
Papa,
yeah.
बाद में I should have locked the door. I apologize. This is what
That's so
he
sweet.
gave.
Was he
He
bringing you
brought me
lunch?
dokle. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Oh
I'm excited
my.
to eat this after this. So, um, yeah,
Oh,
here
very
we took him to. He had eye surgery yesterday, so we had a follow up this
yeah.
morning, and I think he's just feeling better. So he wanted to make something. Um, apologies, though.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
Apologies. Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. What we're doing. What were we talking about? Okay, content, shaping the content. And then, I also found that women that got an H4 visa, they have basically no rights here. They're allowed to live. You cannot work. And these were a lot of women who were very well qualified. And in essence, they just had to become, they were forced to being just homemakers. And it's not like your hopes and desires die just because you've come to another country. And yeah, there was a lot of anxiety, angst, health issues that came up because of that. And I was able to, in
Mm,
some ways see that happening in the community. Like, so many women that I met who were really talented women, but it's like, I can't do anything. I can't, I can't, I really cannot do anything. So I'm sitting around while my husband's gone off to work. And if they have kids, then they have to take care of it. If they don't have kids, like, what the heck am I doing? And I was also, I was raising a young family. I had in laws that were living with me. So, in some ways, I was that classic sandwich generation looking after childcare and elder care. And I knew that this was happening in many other homes as well. So, what are these women facing? How are they coping? What resources are available for them? It was these kinds of things that we got to see. And so it was an example of that. And as we raised our families, we also realized, like, oh, people are learning classical music and dance, and people always thought of that's a hobby. But we would pose these questions to the community: can this actually be a career, or is this
mm,
going to just be a hobby? And would we accept, because as first generation immigrants, the desire for security um,
yeah.
is much more than anything else. And people want their kids to, be safe, follow a safe path. You're going to make money, and there's no sure way of making money if you follow the arts. Now, these are mindsets that we come with into this country. And so it was an interesting time. I think people are not having those conversations anymore. Times have changed. And for us, we have certainly now become much more intentional about our content. Of course, we have a culture piece because that's why readers come to us. But the other thing is our community has matured. Yes, new people are coming every day, but a large number of people have been here for over three
Mm,
decades, just like I have. And there comes a time where you need to invest in the community that you live in. Why is it important for you to be a part of, the school board, or how do you take part in the community, in your neighborhood watch, or how do you take part, and why is it important for you to register and vote? We don't tell our readers, vote this party or that party, and nothing like. We say vote because it's a responsibility. And don't always think that it doesn't matter what I do, because this is a mindset that we came with 30 years ago. I'm not talking about now. You have to always remember these are people that came a long time ago. And we get frozen in time about the
yeah,
time that we came to this country. So you're going to sing those Bollywood songs that you heard, when you came away. I know people who are frozen in time in the 60s or the 70s, and that's all the music they want to hear. And so those things have continued to evolve. And I think we really are a mature community now. We have been here for a long time, and we have to recognize our
mm,
civic responsibilities. And that means participating in all civic activities
yeah,
that we can, whether it's registering for the census, making sure everybody in your family gets counted, making sure you understand and explain to people who don't have the ability to read and write in English, or in other languages. And we are always open. There are several language capabilities in our team as well, so we are happy to help when necessary. We are happy to be a source of referral, because while many things we don't have the capacity for or the expertise in house, we know people who do. This comes of having these deep roots in the community, because that's one thing you build. You build relationships, you build roots in the community that you serve. And so now that is our focus, to make sure that we educate our readers about the importance of civic education, of civic participation, and make sure that um, they truly
yeah.
belong.
So you're celebrating 35 years at this point, and what does this moment in time feel like for both you as part of India Currents and as also being a South Asian in the United States?
So it's a very interesting moment, because I've seen a lot of changes that's happened in the valley. And what's been interesting and validating also is because I've seen a new generation of Indian Americans, South Asians. Um, these terms are used intermingly, but I'm not sure that they actually intermingle. But um, I've seen a new generation of young people grow up here. And I've seen the amazing people that they have become, whether they're musicians or singers or dancers or entrepreneurs or, chefs, or, you name it. And uh, in politics, let's not forget that, we have a vice president who is
Yeah,
half Indian American. So, so uh, I think the best is yet to come, Arpita. I'm going to say that uh, we are going to be a visible community uh, very, very shortly. But it's also going to come at a cost, simply because, the othering, we call that, right? Someone who looks different, somebody whose name sounds different, somebody. Now, new generation, the accents are not there. but many of them still have different, names, but they certainly look different. And that's a factor people notice. Now, I'm not saying that, oh, that's going to hold them back or anything, but people notice. And so I'm excited about that. I think I really have seen such amazing work being done by young South Asians, and uh, so I'm excited about that. On at the India Currents level, I feel like uh, we have built an institution for the community, an institution that represents the community, and I think in some ways. Um, we haven't made a bigger hoopla around it, but we should have. And maybe now we need to start that the community needs to support an institution. Because if you see, the Jewish community, how strongly they support um organizations that serve their cause. For us, we represent the Indian American community, the broader South Asian community. It's a very inclusive. Um, and we've been telling stories, we've been documenting the history of immigration to the Silicon Valley. I mean, you just have to go through the pages in order to see, oh, these were the kinds of things that were happening. Oh, now at this time, these things were happening. Oh, and now, these are the kinds of stories. These stories tell a story. And we've arrived at, where I can call ourselves an institution, you know, and I think it's really important that young South Asians and generally people need to realize that we need to support our own. Energized by that as well. And before we go, I also wanted to, speak to your listeners to say that, we're always looking for um building capacity. And this is community driven work. This is very much, we're always looking for new people, but in this moment in time in particular, we're looking for folks that have social media, you know um, expertise. And um, we're looking for people to help us
Wow.
build that presence. We have a lot of good stories. What we don't have is all this expertise and time to do everything. I realize we can do everything, but we need to build a team that brings all of these things together. So I'm hoping that somebody among your viewers or listeners will be able to reach out and say, hey, let me know what I can do. And I'm very easy to find. You can find all contact information on indiacurrents.com. My personal email address is also publisher at indiacurrents.com. We're available on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, many ways of contacting us. If anybody wants, they can reach out. Just look for India
Thank
Currents.
you. And it was such a pleasure having you. And I hope that folks do reach out. I know I'm also looking forward to contributing. So I hope that other folks who are listening and watching to this also do contribute. Um, yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. It was such a pleasure having you. And we look forward to following your journey and continuing to grow together.
Thank you so much, Arpita. It was a real pleasure to talk with you, and feel free to reach back anytime. Okay? And thank you. Bye, everyone.